I didn't think I'd ever see Riley again, and I definitely didn't think the universe would hand her back to me under a buzzing parking lot light. Like some cruel joke, like a test I never studied for. Because the second I saw her, the first thing I felt wasn't relief. It was anger. It was the kind of anger that shows up late, after the fear has already chewed through you for years and left you hollow, after the hope has learned to stop knocking because no one answers anymore. And the worst part was the timing. I'd spent 3 years preparing for every possible ending. Phone calls from hospitals, police officers at my door, a social media post from someone who knew someone who had seen her somewhere. And none of those endings included a quiet reunion in a nearly empty lot, with fluorescent lights flickering like they couldn't decide whether to expose the truth or keep it hidden. I wasn't prepared for that conversation at all. It was late enough that the sky felt heavy, like a lid pressed down on the world, and the air had that cold metal smell you only notice around concrete and cars and long nights. The lights overhead stuttered every few seconds, turning Riley's face into a series of frames. Here, gone, here again, like reality itself couldn't commit to her being real. We stood a few feet apart, and in that small distance, I could feel 3 years stacked between us like a wall. Everything I'd said to her in my head, everything I'd begged the universe for, everything I'd blamed myself for, all condensed into the silence we didn't know how to cross. "Jen," she said, and her voice cracked the way a voice cracks when it's carrying too much. She hugged her own arms like she was holding herself together, and her eyes kept darting toward the exit of the lot as if she expected a car to roll in at any moment and take her away again. I really didn't think I'd find you here. I wanted to run to her, and I wanted to shove her, and I hated that I wanted both. "Yeah, well," I said, because sarcasm is a shield when you don't trust yourself to speak honestly. Things change. She looked different, and not in a cute, new haircut way. Different in the way someone looks after they've lived through something that didn't leave a visible scar but still rewrote their face, like her eyes had learned too many survival calculations. "You look different," I added, and my voice came out too flat, too practiced, like I was trying to keep my chest from splitting open. "Thanks," she said, and she tried to smile, but the humor didn't make it all the way to her eyes. There it was, the Riley I remembered, the one who could turn a disaster into a joke, the one who could make you laugh even when you were exhausted. Except now the joke fell short, like she'd spent too long in places where laughter could get you hurt. "How have you been?" she asked, and it sounded like she was testing the water with her fingertips. I should have said the truth. "I've been looking for you. I've been losing sleep. I've been stuck in a loop of what-ifs and self-hate and late-night spirals." Instead, I gave her the adult version of a lie. I shrugged. "Surviving, I guess. Work life, you know how it is." And then, because the question had been screaming inside my head for 3 years, I forced it out of my mouth. "And you?" I asked. "What happened to you?" Her gaze dropped to the pavement, like the asphalt had answers. "I can't really talk about that," she said softly. The air shifted, as if the night itself leaned closer to listen. "But I'm back now," she added quickly, and her words tried to paste a happy ending over something that was still bleeding. "That's what matters, right?" Back. The word hit me like a weight on my sternum, because it sounded too simple for what she'd done. Back in town. Back in my life. Back like nothing happened. Back. I repeated, and I heard my own voice stumble. As in back in town, or back as in. I didn't finish because I didn't know what kind of back was even possible. "Are you okay?" I asked, and the question came out rower than the rest, like a crack in the armor. "Yeah," she said too fast. "I'm fine." And even if she hadn't been standing under a spotlight of harsh lighting, I would have known it wasn't true, because "I'm fine" has a sound when it's real and a sound when it's survival. "Really?" she insisted. I just had to figure some things out. 3 years ago, she vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no warning that made sense, no "I'll be back soon." One day she was texting me memes and complaining about her job, and the next day her number went to voicemail like it had never belonged to anyone at all. At first, I did what anyone does. I assumed she lost her phone, or she was busy, or she needed a few days. By the end of the first week, I was calling mutual friends like a madwoman, asking if anyone had heard from her. By the end of the month, I was scrolling through old photos looking for clues that weren't there, reading our last messages as if they were a coded confession. There were rumors, of course, because there are always rumors when someone disappears. Someone's cousin swore they saw her at a gas station 2 towns over. Someone's coworker said she mentioned leaving. Someone on social media posted a blurry photo of a girl in a hoodie, and people argued in the comments like that was proof. I chased all of it. I drove through places I didn't know, parking outside addresses that might have been wrong, sitting in my car with my hands gripping the wheels so tight my wrists ached, imagining that if I stared hard enough at a doorway, she would walk out and wave like she'd just been running late. I filed reports, I called hospitals, I refreshed pages, I convinced myself to be optimistic and then hated myself for being optimistic, because optimism felt like betrayal when I didn't have facts. And through all of it, the quiet poison seeped in. What if she left because of me? What if I missed something? What if she tried to tell me, and I didn't listen hard enough? Because that's what your mind does when someone vanishes. It tries to create a reason you can hold, even if that reason is self-destruction. So when Riley stood in front of me now, alive and breathing, my relief didn't erase the years. It slammed into them and made them louder. There was a long silence, heavy and awkward, and I dared to take one step closer. "I didn't stop looking for you," I said, because I needed her to understand the size of what she'd done. "I thought maybe you needed space or something." Her face hardened for a second. "I did," she snapped, and then her eyes softened like she regretted the snap the moment it left her mouth. "But I didn't mean for you to worry," she added. "I didn't want you to feel guilty." That word hit me wrong. Guilty. I let out a laugh that sounded like a gasp. "You disappeared on us," I said, and my voice rose despite myself. "I thought something terrible happened." She looked away. "Maybe it did," she muttered, and she fiddled with the sleeve of her jacket like the fabric could anchor her. My stomach tightened into a knot. We were standing close enough now that I could see the tiny tremor in her fingers, the way her breathing changed when the conversation stepped near certain words, the way her eyes kept scanning the edges of the lot like she didn't feel safe even here. "Riley," I said, and I felt my throat burn. I spent years wondering what I did wrong. I hated that I was admitting it, hated that I was giving my guilt a voice, but it was the truth. "I thought you were hurt or worse," I continued. "I blamed myself for not reaching out enough, for not being there when you needed me." "It's not your fault," she whispered. "You didn't know." But if I had just... I started, because my brain still wanted a way to rewrite the past. "Stop," she said, lifting a hand slightly like she could physically stop my guilt from spilling out. "You don't get it." "Then make me get it," I said, and for the first time my voice cracked. "What happened?" She stared at me, and something in her eyes looked like a decision being made. Like she was weighing the risk of telling me against the risk of me never truly letting her back in. "Fine," she said, and her voice sharpened. But don't judge me for it. I was in a crisis, Jen. The words sounded small and enormous at the same time. I didn't need saving, she said, and her eyes lit with a fierce old fire. I needed to get lost. Lost, I repeated, and my heart started beating faster like it recognized the edge of danger. Lost where? With who? She swallowed. The truth is, she said, her voice trembling now, I thought I was going to step away for a little while and figure it out. I thought I was going to get my head straight. But I didn't, she admitted, and her confession felt like a door creaking open. I ended up with some people, some not great people. What do you mean? I asked, because my brain was already painting images I didn't want. Her fingers shook as she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. There were nights, she said, and her voice went thin, where I wasn't sure if I'd make it back. And it just felt easier to disappear. Easier, I echoed, and I shook my head hard, like the motion could reset reality. To throw everyone away. I thought we were supposed to be in this together. Riley's shoulders sagged. Sometimes being together feels worse than being alone, she said quietly. The sentence landed like a bruise because I understood it in a way I didn't want to. I'd seen her smile through pain before. I'd watched her show up with mascara fresh like she hadn't cried in a bathroom 5 minutes earlier. I'd watched her refuse help because she thought needing help made her weak. I didn't want you to see me like that, she continued. I didn't want you to worry about my mess. I figured if I just went away, it would fix things. But it didn't, I said, and the realization hit me like thunder. You went through all of that, alone. Her eyes filled. I thought about you every day, she admitted, voice breaking. And I hated myself for leaving. I thought I could handle it, she said, and her laugh was hollow. But when things spiraled, I couldn't reach out. I couldn't let you see me fall apart. A silence crept in again, but it wasn't awkward now. It was thick with the weight of what she wasn't fully saying. I thought I was supposed to be strong, she whispered, and the words sounded like a sentence she'd been repeating to herself for years. Something in me cracked, because I had spent 3 years imagining her in danger, but I hadn't spent 3 years imagining her ashamed. I should have known you weren't fine, I said, and bitterness crept into my voice. I shouldn't have assumed you just. Stop, she said again, and her eyes locked onto mine. Please don't judge me. It's a mess and I'm still figuring it out, she said, and her voice turned raw. But I'm here now. I survived, she added, and the word survived sounded like a confession of how close she came to not. Even when it felt impossible. I exhaled shakily, and I could taste the night air, cold, metallic like the world outside a hospital. I'm just so angry you put yourself through that, I whispered. You could have reached out, I said, and my voice shook. I would have done anything. I know, she said, and her tears finally fell. But I didn't, she admitted. And I'm sorry for that. Sorry isn't enough, I snapped, and the anger flared because it still needed somewhere to go. Do you even realize how many late-night searches I did? How many times I was afraid I'd never see you again? I do, she whispered. And you deserved so much better, she said, and the shame in her voice sounded old. I was afraid of judgment, she admitted. Afraid of my own weakness. I thought you'd see me as broken. The word broken sat between us like shattered glass. Because the truth was, I had always thought of Riley as the tough one. Even when she was spiraling, she had the kind of personality that could turn pain into performance, that could make a room forget she was hurting. I didn't need you to be perfect, I said, and my voice softened despite myself. I just wanted you to be safe. She nodded, lips trembling. Then I'm sorry for not allowing you that, she whispered. But I promise I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to survive, she said, and the phrase sounded like a mantra. Even when it feels like the world is crashing. I stared at her, and in my head, 3 years played like a montage. My phone lighting up at 2 a.m. with another dead-end message. Me driving through rain to check a place someone said they saw her. Me sitting on my bed with my laptop open, typing her name into search bars like the internet owed me a miracle. Me blaming myself, then blaming her, then blaming the whole universe for being so casual with the people you love. Survive. I repeated, almost incredulous. You think this is enough? I'm trying, she said again, and this time the words felt like they had blood behind them. I'm so tired of running, she confessed. I thought if I just disappeared, maybe the hurt would go away. But it didn't. I felt my anger soften into something heavier, grief. Because grief is what you feel when you realize you've been holding your breath for years without noticing. I should have believed in you, I whispered, guilt seeping back in. I should have known it was hard for you. Don't blame yourself, she said fiercely, stepping closer. I was the one who took the leap, she insisted. I wanted to be strong on my own, and in the process, I pushed everyone away. Including you. The words hit hardest because they were true, and because they carried a choice I didn't get to argue with at the time. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people under a flickering light, breathing in the same cold air, trying to figure out how to hold both truths at once. That I loved her, and that she hurt me. That she was alive, and that I still had scars from when she wasn't. I always thought you were made of tougher stuff, I admitted quietly. That you could handle anything. Riley looked down at the pavement, and a mix of shame and determination flared in her eyes. I thought so too, she murmured. Then she lifted her gaze back to mine, and for the first time that night, I saw something genuine behind her expression. Not a defense, not a performance, not an apology shaped to avoid discomfort, but a real, trembling hope. But we're both still here, she said. And maybe that's enough to start over. Start over. I echoed, and my voice carried both skepticism and longing. Yeah, she said, and her smile finally reached her eyes, small but real. If you can forgive me, she added carefully, I'd like to try. Forgiveness. It's a big word people throw around like it's a switch, like you can flip it, and everything becomes clean. But forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process, and sometimes it's a decision you make again and again until your body believes what your mind is trying to accept. I suppose it's going to take time, I said slowly, because honesty was the only thing that felt safe now. Time, she agreed, and her smile wavered. Honesty, it all goes hand in hand. Maybe we can catch up over coffee, she suggested, and talk through the mess. I exhaled, and for the first time in that parking lot, the air didn't feel like it was crushing my lungs. Or, I said, surprising myself, we could just sit in silence until the stars come out. And she laughed, an actual laugh, familiar music with new notes. Definitely that, she said, and in that moment, the darkness around us didn't feel as threatening. It felt like something we could walk through together instead of something she had to run from alone. We didn't solve everything in that parking lot. We didn't map out the missing 3 years like a documentary, and she didn't hand me every detail like I was entitled to it, and I didn't suddenly stop feeling the sting of abandonment just because I understood the reason behind it. But we did something that mattered more than closure. We chose honesty over pretending, and we chose presence over disappearing. As we stood there side by side, the fluorescent lights still flickering above, the shadows around us shifted. This time, though, I felt ready to face whatever came next, not because the past was healed, but because the running had finally stopped. Sometimes the twist isn't that the missing person returns. Sometimes the twist is realizing they didn't leave because they didn't care. They left because they were drowning, and they were terrified you'd see it. And sometimes the bravest thing two people can do isn't to explain everything perfectly. It's to sit in the aftermath, look at each other without flinching, and say, "I'm still here, if you're still here." That night, under a buzzing light in a quiet parking lot, we didn't get a clean ending. We got something better. A beginning that finally told the truth. If you've ever been left with silence where a person should have been, if you've ever carried guilt that wasn't yours, or anger that was really grief in disguise, share your story in the comments, because someone reading it might be sitting in their own dark parking lot right now wondering if they're allowed to start over. This was Plot Twist Revelations. If this story hit you, hit like, subscribe for more emotional twists that feel painfully real, and remember, disappearing doesn't erase pain, it just relocates it, and the strongest thing you can do is come back and face it.